Hi, this is John and welcome to another edition of Statistics Tell a Story. I'm going to do a series of poker episodes and hopefully I will continue that even throughout the summer and in the next football season. So virtually all of it will be about tournament hold'em. But in this first episode, it's going to be very kind of basic with some definitions and terminology. Terminology is important, right? It's the way we communicate, and it'll touch on the difference between cash games and tournament games. But this will be basically the only episode, with maybe some rare instances, that I talk about cash games. So if you're a cash game player, now a lot of the principles hold with tournament cash, but they are a little bit different. I don't think they're quite as different as some people make them out to be. But basically, I will be talking about tournaments and decision making within tournaments as we go further. Okay, so first, I'm going to define a few things to make sure that we have an understanding of what we mean when we say equity. Equity is a piece of the pie, basically, right? So if you have if you own 20% of a stock or 20% of something, that's your equity, that's your piece of the pie. ROI, of course, stands for return on investment. Okay? So I'm going to talk a lot, not only this episode, but other episodes, more about return on investment, because it really comes down to positive return on investment, whether you're talking about cash games or tournaments, but we should distinguish between this, okay? And I'm going to mostly, again, talk about return on investment. So, for a cash game, we want positive ROI, okay? So, for example, if we can make a decision where we're 51-49, okay, and we can put up $51. So we're flipping a coin maybe with a friend, and put up $49, and we have a proposition where we put up $49 to win $51. In theory, we should take that every time. It's positive ROI. It's a cash game. That's how Las Vegas, right, has billions and billions of dollars from 51-49, 52-48 type propositions. In tournaments, well, there's a difference between the ROI on a particular hand with respect to chips and the ROI with respect to the whole tournament. Okay, and we'll talk about that here and in future episodes. So, for example, in a tournament, you might have a 51-49 type proposition with chips, where you could gain 51 chips and lose 49 chips, and it may or may not be the correct play, because now you're talking about tournaments. So you might have a situation where you have positive chip ROI, but it's actually negative tournament ROI. Now, most of the time you don't know, right? You're using some common sense, some gut feel, and maybe some quick and dirty mathematics as best you can. Okay, but so let's just say we have a tournament. It's a $10 buy-in, and there's 100 people. Okay, and just for theoretical sake, let's assume that there's no ante, and somehow, even though it's not maybe a practical situation, but in mathematics we don't necessarily always have to have a practical situation. We can have a theoretical situation to make a point, okay? So let's just say you are heads up with one other person, and the other 98 are just sitting off to the side. And so after you're being heads up, let's say you start with 10,000 in chips. So after you're heads up with somebody for everything, right? The other 98, they still have 10,000 in chips. You are either going to be out of the tournament or you're going to have 20,000 in chips, okay? Well, to start the tournament, your equity was $10. That was your piece of the pie, right? To use the term equity. Or you could say, well, since there was a total of, you bought in for $10, everybody put in $10, 100 people put in $10, that's $1,000. So 10 of your $1,000, that's 1%. So you each have 1% equity, okay? So your head's up with somebody, and the other 98, they're on the sidelines. You're either going to have 0 chips or 20,000 in chips. Well, 0 chips, you have 0 equity, right? You're knocked out of the tournament. You have no equity. If you double up and you have 20,000 chips, and here's the point I'm making. Intuitively, you might think, well, you have 2% of all the chips, which is true, but you do not have 2% equity. Now, some of you are familiar with ICM calculations as you get closer to the final table or at the final table. And this can be demonstrated. It's actually it's through a recursive argument, but you'll just have to take my word for it and experts' words for it. If you have 20,000 in chips, you do not have 2% equity. Now, what equity do you have? You have very close to 2% equity. I don't think anybody really knows what it is. You'd have to go through a simulation, and it would be, even though today's computers could probably do it, it would be very involved, not worth it. So we kind of take an educated guess. What is our equity? It's not 2%. Maybe it's 1.95, 1.98. Okay. So what's happening? Let's just approximate it. I don't know, 1.95% equity. So what's really happening? By sitting on the sideline, if you only have 1.95% equity, and the person that was knocked out, presumably that you won, they have 0%. Well, all the others, since it has to add up to 100%, must have slightly more than 1% equity. So by sitting out, you've actually gained. And it's a truism in tournaments, at least almost always, that a chip gained is not worth as much as a chip lost, at least in terms of absolute value, okay? So again, this case, the person that got knocked out, they lost 1% equity, tournament equity. The person that won did not win 1% equity, just shy of it. Now, that doesn't mean you sit out every hand. But what it does mean is you are not looking for just negligible positive chip equity. Now, what are you looking for? Is it, and this is where you get to ROI. So if you had a proposition in a tournament and you had a tiny ROI, you were given a proposition, I'm going to give you a tiny, tiny, tiny ROI, you probably shouldn't take it, okay? Because even though you might have positive chip equity, positive ROI, you're likely going to have negative tournament equity. And that's different from cash games, okay? So again, if you're a cash game player, a lot of the principles, as I said, will hold as we go on, but the one truism is, for cash game, if you believe you have positive ROI, 51.49, even 50.03 to 49.97, you should take that proposition, at least in theory, if you can afford to lose. Generally, of course, you have a bankroll that merits that you can afford to lose. Okay, so that's all I'm going to talk about here for this first episode, trying to distinguish between tournament equity and cash equity. But again, as we go further on, we will talk almost exclusively about tournaments. And when will that next video be? I'm not sure. I'm heading on vacation, but I might try to sneak one in the meantime. But until next time, thank you for watching. And if you have not done so, please be sure to subscribe and like this video. Thanks again.